So good evening. We were thrilled to kick off the school year today. And while we are disappointed that our students are not here with us in person just yet, we were really thrilled with the opportunity to begin to engage our students in the new school year. As we walked about the district today, spending time in each of our schools, checking in with our teachers, it was really exciting for me to see our students' lovely faces displayed either on the monitors of our teachers, on the smart boards in classrooms, as they are engaging and hearing students laugh and student discussion beginning to occur. So we were really pleased to be able to not only launch the 2021 school year today, but we did so with great success. And that success really sits at the hands of all of our teachers and our administrative team, who put forth an incredible amount of work in preparing for today's launch. Additionally, I want to give a special thanks and my sincere appreciation to everybody in the technology front that has worked tirelessly through the weekend to make sure things went as well as they possibly could have today. We had a handful of little glitches that did occur with a handful of students in each building that had difficulties with some access. And then Google itself had challenges that were hitting education universally with meets that were dropping out and delays in accessing Google Drive. But that was something that was not Irvington specific. It was something that was affecting Google. And as the day went on, it appeared to get a little bit better. And with any new schedule and a whole new operation, there's little tweaks here and there. I know for kindergarten and first grade, Dr. Cantor is making a few adjustments to the specials rotation for this short period of time before we launch the hybrid opportunity in the next 2 weeks. But I want to thank everybody for their support, all of our wonderful staff for making today a great opening for our students and really a great kickoff to the school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. We have our committee reports. Is there someone from the Communications Committee who would like to report on the communications meeting from this past August?
Yeah, can you hear me through this mic?
Yeah.
Okay, so on the 19th of August, Maura Getted, Aaron Bernstein, and the Superintendent Harrison and I had a meeting, and essentially, I guess I would say if both Ms. Getted and Superintendent Harrison agree that the reports, most of what we worked on is reflected in tonight's presentation about where people should be looking for information, particularly about the issue that parents should be going as much as possible to the direct building and also to the resources that are on the website at this time that are continually being updated. Would you say that's true, that the slide in the presentation pretty
Yes,
much reflects
absolutely.
the content of the meeting?
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we have the space in our agenda for community comment, as we've been doing throughout this. If you'd like to make a comment at this time, please post your name and address in the Q&A function in Zoom, and we'll then recognize you to speak. Again, though, we typically only allow comments once during the meeting per person. If time allows, you can comment a second time. So if you comment during the first period, you may not be permitted to comment during the second period, and there will be opportunity for comment after this evening's presentation. So with that, I'll look to see if there's anyone who wants to make a comment at this time or whether we'll move on. So seeing none, Dr. Harrison, back over to you.
Very good. So good evening. Tonight's presentation and discussion will focus on two items, reopening of the school year and some updates that I think are critical for our parent community to be aware of, and also a little foreshadowing of the work that we'll be doing at district goals this year in the school district. So we'll begin with the all-important reopening updates. I was thrilled to have had 3 superintendent's conference days last week, where we truly were able to engage our staff in probably the most comprehensive series of professional learning that's ever been offered in the Irvington schools. Here, our fabulous nurses provided training on health and safety protocols in our schools. Our SEL leaders, and growing out of the work of not only the SEL reopening subcommittee, but considering survey data that we collected from our faculty and staff, facilitated a workshop on supporting social and emotional needs during the reopening. There was particular training regarding new school and district protocols and procedures. And I want to note here with respect to them, one of the wonderful things that we have in our phased-in reopening is that opportunity for our staff to work really closely with our administrative team in each and every school to work through all the nuances of all the different protocols and procedures that will be implemented when our students arrive. So not only did we have an initial round of training in this area, it is something that is going to continue to be fine-tuned over the coming 2 weeks. There was professional learning on the all-important technology and the approaches that we're going to be taking to be able to support the hybrid instruction. There was instructional professional learning that was designed, focused on instructional design, specific to helping teachers plan in a hybrid model and in a distance learning model. And then we had incredible professional learning on equity, diversity, and inclusion. This was the first official step in our work, in our partnership with NYU. We had the executive director, Dr. David Kirkland, who provided a keynote for all of our faculty and staff across the district. And then other NYU staff members facilitated building-specific breakout sessions later in the day. So all in all, it was an incredible 3 days where our staff was engaged in so many things that were critical to the reopening of school. We have been involved in an ongoing basis in Chromebook distribution. As was communicated in one of my letters a couple weeks back, we continue to face delays in receiving the Chromebooks that we have ordered. So what we did is that we prioritized the distribution of the devices that we have in-house at this time. And you can see the priority that we are focusing upon before us. First and foremost, the students that did not have devices in their home were provided with a Chromebook. Students that were participating in 100% distance learning, that is the option that the district is affording families, were also prioritized. And then, of course, our middle school students, because much of the program has shifted in a direction where there's that connection with the use of the Google Suite, as well as the use of a one-to-one approach. And then teachers and aides were provided with Chromebooks to be able to support instruction. At this point in time, you can see we've distributed almost 900 Chromebooks. We're still watching, and our director of technology is emailing our vendors every single day. Right now, our ETA is 2 weeks on the receipt of our other devices. Once they are in hand, we will make sure that we put a Chromebook in every student's hands to be able to support not only distance learning and hybrid learning, but to make sure that every student has an exclusive device for their use when they are in school. I wanted to provide an update on the 100% distance learning option. This is an area where we've seen a little bit of fluctuation. The number has ticked up a little bit, where we have a few more families that have enrolled their children in the distance learning option. In fact, we've seen a couple little shifts where we had some folks that actually changed their mind and wanted their children to participate in the hybrid approach. So when we're looking at the district enrollment of approximately 1,725 students, we're seeing 166 students district-wide participating in the 100% distance learning option, which equates to just fewer than 10%. And you can see the distribution at grade levels. And I do want to highlight a very astute observation that Ms. Proper made at the last meeting, that when we look at some of the areas where we have the greatest interest in it, it is 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, which so happens to be the students that were in middle school last year and the students that participated in the first year of our one-to-one initiative. Therefore, one could make some assumptions that there's a correlation between those school experiences last year and the decision here. I don't want to assert that's true, but I think it's a very smart observation that was made that was worth repeating. So our daily health screening requirements, each and every student and staff member will be required to complete a daily health screening questionnaire prior to leaving for school or work. So we want this to be completed before a student begins to walk to school, the hops in mom or dad's car to ride to school, or heads off to the bus stop, or before a staff member gets in their car to drive to school. This is a web-based application that is also going to be available as an app. If you visit our website today, you can get a little window into what it looks like for our staff members. Our staff members are completing it on a daily basis. In the coming days, we hope to be able to send out a communication to the school community that will not only allow families to be able to go download the free app so you could have it on your smartphone or your device for use, but will also give you an opportunity to practice its use. Currently, it has been approved by Apple for download, and we're just in the final approval stages for Google Play. We're told that it should happen any day now. Once that is ready, we will roll that out to the school community. There will be a very specific targeted communication on this. So we'll be sure that to make sure that everybody gets it. Not only will a letter be distributed by me, but I likely will use our alert system as a reminder to point parents towards that communication. I do want to say that this is an area where we cannot have flexibility. If I can draw the community's attention back to my communication from last week, where I did send out a lengthy letter, but a letter that also linked to our user-friendly reopening guide that we created. In there, I talked about this being a non-negotiable. This is an area where we cannot play around. This is the health and safety of every student and every staff member in the Irvington schools. So we're going to take this very, very seriously. If we have situations where a student does not have the screening questionnaire completed, when they arrive at school, they're going to be isolated. They're going to be checked by a nurse to make sure they don't have a fever, and then a parent will be contacted to complete the questionnaire. After the second occurrence, that the parent will be contacted, and the parent will have to come pick up their child from school, regardless of grade level. We don't want this to come across as a punitive measure, but it's a step that we must take to provide for the safety of all of our students and staff. This is an overview that we share as a resource, kind of a flow chart that, as you can see, was adapted from North Carolina, and was actually created by our school physician with a team of other doctors that collaborate with school districts, and looking at the decision-making process as it pertains to one's health and their ability to attend school or attend work. Really simple flow chart, but as you can imagine, nothing is ever absolute. So very simply stated, if one presents any of the symptoms identified, those that are common with COVID, you can see the direction that we're taking and the flow from no COVID test, what has to happen. Obviously, we're going to encourage COVID testing in every single case. Certainly support our families and help them get access to prompt testing. And as I've stated before, we're in the process of finalizing a plan right now with Quest laboratories where the district will pay for the testing for its own employees to have an assured quick turnaround where we're guaranteed to have results within 2 to 3 days. We are currently hearing stories where folks are getting results in a day, and we're hearing other stories, depending, I suppose, on the lab that people are going to, that it's 5, 6 days. So this will give us a guaranteed quick turnaround for our staff. In all cases, when a person has symptoms or there is a positive test involved, there will be immediate follow-up that will happen from the school level for faculty and staff, with the administration as well as the nurse. And at a school level for students, the school nurse will be in communication with parents to follow up on the reason why a child is out, to collaborate with them to see if testing needs to be had, and then to direct those important next steps. So supplies has been an area where we've communicated concern along the way. You can see that I provided some updates a short time ago. So folks looking along at home and we're looking at a preview of the presentation prior to the meeting, you would not have seen this red font on the screen. We're pleased to be able to receive our orders of the sanitizing wipes today. So we're in really good shape there, and our gloves arrived today. We're still waiting on our Chromebooks as well as earbuds. We've ordered earbuds with embedded microphones for all of our students and our staff for their use in supporting distance learning. So again, vendors are telling us they're about 2 weeks out, but I'm not going to hold my breath. Hopefully they'll be here sooner than later. We keep hearing of delays across the board in all technology devices. So hopefully we'll receive them in the near future, and we'll be able to distribute them accordingly. Staffing is an area that I think we all need to pause and reflect upon. In our last meeting 2 weeks ago, I spoke about concerns that we do have. Currently, when we think about staff members that for their own health needs have accommodations that are enabling them to work from home, so that would be staff that are essentially on 100% distance learning. In each of these cases, we go through a very thorough review process that is managed by Ms. Ellis, and that staff members and their doctors complete necessary paperwork that is reviewed by Ms. Ellis as well as our attorneys. And at that point in time, it appears someone is eligible for an accommodation. That accommodation is then reviewed with our district physician. So it is a multi-step process. So we're literally looking at 3 levels of review for each and every accommodation request. At this point in time, you can see we have 11 staff members or teachers that are working remotely, and the distribution there. In looking at this, you have to think, gosh, so how are we supervising classrooms? So what is important to note on this front is that this isn't a situation, certainly, where our students are going to not be well supervised. We are in the process of hiring monitors to be able to supervise all of our students in classrooms. So while the teachers are teaching from home because of their personal health needs, the district has to employ, in this case, an additional 11 employees to be able to make sure all students are well supervised in their classrooms while their teachers are teaching from home. We also have some situations where teachers or aides have approved requests for childcare leaves that require some level of substitutes. There are modifications to the laws on a federal and state level that provide staff the ability to apply for childcare leaves during this period of time. And as a result, when those applications come in, they're also thoroughly reviewed. And at this point in time, we have some staff members, as you can see, 2 at Dow's Lane and 1 at the high school, that are going to have some leaves of absence to be able to provide for necessary childcare in their homes. Athletics has been a real hot topic lately. So when we step back, this is kind of like a moving target. And not only are we concerned about safety protocols, but we have to follow the different tiers of guidance that have been issued by the Department of Health. And when we think about the Department of Health, here we have to also think about the guidance that's coming down from the state as well as the section. So we're in a place right now, there was a communication that went out from our athletic director today. This is to begin the process for what is considered low-risk sports, and you can see that's cross-country, field hockey, soccer, girls tennis. They can begin practicing or tryouts on the 29th. We cannot do anything before that. So when we say that there's no, captain's practices, we want our students to come to the table and begin to work their workouts on that day. Aside from their personal conditioning and work they may do, the school cannot sanction any type of competition or training as an organized event leading up to that date. The section is going to be coming out with more specific guidance, we believe tomorrow, that will guide that. But what is absent very clearly right now is looking at what is considered the high-risk fall sports, which are football and volleyball. Right now, there is not authorization, we could say, whether from the governor or from the Department of Health, for those sports to begin practicing or competing at this point in time. Additionally, I know within the section, and having seen some of their communications lately, that there is also concern about the ability to start girls swimming this fall because of the nature of contact and the proximity and being in the water with others. So there is some further research being done on that front. Modified sports, we're waiting for the section's direction as to how we're going to proceed. Right now, when we look at the timeline of being able to begin practices on September 29th, that will take us into the middle of October before we could actually begin having competitions, which means that much of the seasons would have already been lost. So any schedules that would have been developed by the section are going to have to be completely reworked. And the section itself is actually guiding schools to not schedule non-league games. The reason for doing so is they don't want the additional contact, and any non-league games have to go through the section for approval. So we have to, while we're waiting for all that other guidance and starting to gear up our student athletes for the low to moderate risk sports that can begin on September 29th, we have to make sure all of our students have the necessary medical clearance, and all those communications will be coming forth from our fine athletic director. Transportation, there were communications about a week and a half ago that went out where we were sharing the unfortunate news that we had to delay the release of our in-district bus routes. The reason for that is that, as you can imagine, working through the cohort model makes it a little more complex than the typical routing that we would have by a school level. And we're also trying to be considerate of the parent survey data that was collected to make sure that we're not putting a focus on routing children whose parents have already told us that they are not going to put their children on a school bus for transportation to and from school. Wherever possible here, we are going to make an effort to provide as much social distancing on a school bus. But as we can imagine, there's lots of limitations on this front. There's only so many seats on a school bus, and we're going to do our best to make sure that we can provide the necessary social distancing. But in all cases, the bus driver, the bus monitors will be wearing masks. All students will have to wear masks. We'll provide distancing wherever we possibly can. And buses will be sanitized by our own custodial crew between bus runs during the school day and on a daily basis by the transportation contractor. Currently, the out-of-district bus routes are available in the transportation portal, so folks whose children attend out-of-district placements will have that opportunity to know, of course, their bus details for their children. School lunch. Meals are available beginning today. There's a pre-order process right now to make sure that we're providing meals for students that are in need. The pre-order system will be utilized for elementary schools beginning on the 21st. So families, will actually be a link that you'll be the separate communication as well, that you'll be able to go on and make that lunch choice for your child. Much like last year when we were forced into that closure in March, At this point in time, meals will be provided for families at no cost. So this kind of follows suit of the plans that have been in place in the directive that's come from the National Lunch Program, that we'll be able to do that. Students will be able to get lunch. This isn't snacks. This isn't the additional items that are available for sale in each of our cafeterias or associated with our lunch program. It is the core lunch option that will be available free of charge to families. However, I do want to note in these cases, it is necessary, though, for our students to go through the purchase process, for parents to be able to complete the order, because we have to earn credit to be able to get reimbursement for the meals. So at the elementary level, parents will have to complete the order process, as was indicated before. And at the secondary level, our students will still have to go through the purchase process. While not being charged for the lunch, we need to be able to account a student for every lunch that is distributed to make sure, again, that the district is reimbursed. I'm going to pause here and actually invite Ms. Stein to talk about the joys that she's had in funding the challenges associated with the reopening. So, Carol?
Okay. So, as I've said in the past, this has been a bit of a roller coaster financially. Unfortunately, we're mostly going down, not up. But, there's been some things. So the costs that we presented last time were the K-1 costs, the incremental costs to switch to that model, which I had identified as about $61,000, and I'm still saying that same number at this point. Until we really get it going and we see how we'll work with the custodians, that might come down a little if we can reallocate some of our staff. So we're working on that right now. PPE, which is all of our protective equipment, our personally protective equipment, we've been spending a lot of money on this, so that it's not cheap. Some things have been very inexpensive to get, other things have been very expensive to get. And a lot of times it ebbs and flows. We're trying to get the best pricing when we can, but we also recognize that we need to have this stuff on hand. So we have now bought, masks, gloves, face shields, plastic barriers, all these things that are mentioned. They're not cheap. So we've been investing in that to protect our students and staff. The big expense that I see going forward, and again, this will be happening as we move forward, are the monitors that we're going to need to cover our teachers when they're working remotely. So if in the hybrid model, when the students are in school, and it is a teacher that's been assigned to work remotely for a health perspective, we need to have somebody in that room for safety reasons. So that's what I expect in terms of if we were to continue this all year. Now that is a large number because I've forecasted for the whole year. It may not be the whole year. Teachers may be able to come back. So it may be lower than that. Hopefully no more teachers will be identified because that's assuming that all of the ones right now have been identified. We've also purchased signs, the MERV filters we've talked about, extra radios, the handheld radios that we use to monitor and communicate, and the hand washing station. So all those things have cost additional money in facility supplies. And finally, in technology, Dr. Harrison has talked about the investment in Chromebooks. We did, this is a net number. It's certainly not the full number of the 625 Chromebooks, the microphones, the other things we've purchased, but it is the offset because we did allocate money in for technology devices this year. So what I've put down here is the difference between what we actually had allocated in our budget, which we are not purchasing this year, and instead the Chromebooks. So it's a difference. So all that adds up to just under $500,000 right now. I am hoping that when the dust settles, it'll be a little bit lower and we can manage some of this, but it could also be higher. So I'm just giving that to your attention.
Yeah, and I would say where we recognize there's going to have to be budgetary adjustments as we move forward in the school year, there still remains to be some degree of optimism that there's going to be stimulus funds that'll come back to offset some of these costs down the road so that we'd be able to submit for reimbursement, just not straight check to the district or to the state, that there would be a reimbursement process. There's also prospects of other opportunities such as FEMA funding and other grants that may be available that the district could be eligible for that could actually lower this overall out-of-pocket expenditure to the district at this time. So as we always like to say, and to come back to our communications committee report from a little while ago, we're really committed to trying to communicate as regularly as we possibly can. I always want to draw parents and community members' attention to our reopening UFSD webpage that has lots of information on it. We put up some videos and some other resources last week that we didn't push out to you. So I would encourage you to check in on a regular basis to see what's there. We have year-long schedules, calendars for elementary level and secondary level to help folks understand the routine so you can plan accordingly in your homes. There's the all-important user-friendly reopening plan overview that we created to really simplify that 60-page document to help families and children plan for the return to school and understand all the expectations that we're going to have here in our school buildings. As always, I want to encourage community members to email teachers, email your guidance counselors, email your principals. A lot of the high-level stuff we've addressed through the summer months, and now I'm finding myself, and while I'm certainly welcome and appreciate all the outreach from our parent community, a lot of the questions that are being asked now are really school-level questions in and around student experience, school program, so that consider where your question may be, because it may save you a step, because ultimately I may refer you to a school-level staff member. You can always certainly review, email us at reopening@Irvington Schools. Again, that address goes directly to Mary, Carol, and myself. You can email the board at Irvington Schools, and that goes to the Board of Education and me. We're constantly updating the FAQ document that's on the reopening page. I know Mary was adding another question to it today. And look for school and district level communications. They're going to be ongoing. As much as my schedule allows, I'm going to continue to do the regular Facebook Live on Wednesdays. I may not always be able to hit noon as I've been doing for the past several months, but I'm committed to trying to do that at least weekly as necessary. There's one new tool that's actually going to be coming out across the state, and our governor spoke of that today. And it is essentially a COVID dashboard that is going to be a Department of Health tool that is going to report and track positive COVID cases in individual school communities, as well as throughout the region. So as a community member or as a teacher, you could literally log on to this portal and you will be able to see the number of confirmed cases in the school district. So when we're saying school district, that's going to speak to our students, our staff, but not the at-large community member that may not have a connection to the school. The effort here, as I understand it, is a matter of transparency on the state level, and to also help the state and school districts be able to look at the trends and the data to help inform their decision making. I have to be honest with you, this is an area that I've been frankly angered at the leadership of New York State and the Department of Health. Our governor spoke of this about 2 weeks ago, and through some of my communications in my leadership roles in superintendent organizations and through collaboration with other agencies, it was clear that when the governor announced that there was going to be such a portal, that there hadn't been prior planning with the Department of Health, because it really seemed they were caught off guard. So I feel for those folks who are really working hard. And then today, immediately following the governor's press conference, superintendents received an email from the Department of Health telling us that we had, at 12:30, telling us we had to report to a webinar at 1:30 today. It's inexcusable, it's disrespectful, it demonstrates terrible leadership, and I know that wouldn't fly if I did that to our school community, if I did that to our wonderful teachers and administrators and support staff. So we sit through a webinar that's about an hour long, and then they tell us, well, they're giving us latitude today that we have to report data today, but they're extending deadlines rather than having to report by 3 o'clock, and needless to say, it was 2:30 when they're telling us this, that they would extend it till 5 p.m. And I can tell you many districts, Irvington included, did not submit the data today. The data is not simply going in and saying each school, there's no cases, no cases, no cases. We literally have to break down data by the number of total employees in the district, the number in each school, the number that are teaching from home, the number that are teaching in school, the number of kids that are home, the model of instruction that we're having. There is specific data that has to be entered for each and every school, and data that school districts could not organize in such a fashion. We'll have our data up tomorrow, as will most other school districts, but it was an absolute failure and really an abomination of a process and really I hate to say it, our governor putting a black eye on DOH when they've done a lot of good work. So this information will be out there. It'll be reported accordingly, but there's lots of question marks. They told us we needed to do it today. We have yet to receive a single guidance document. We sat on a webinar. You could see slides, and unless you took pictures of them with your phone or screenshots from your device, nothing was disseminated to the field guiding us as to what we need to do. So this is really a sloppy process. And as I've been through this entire process, I want to be transparent with the Board of Education and the community. It was not viable to do it and to do it accurately today. We will do it moving forward. But it was really, really a sad day in how this was handled today. So on to some of the more exciting news, and having talked about what was a great day reopening, and I think you got a sense of the emotion that school leaders, school nurses felt across the state today, having received that news from Department of Health. I wanted to talk a little bit about district goals. I know typically end of September we have a more thorough presentation on them, but because of our pacing of this summer and the focus in and around a reopening, we didn't have the typical preview of the areas that we're focusing on for district goals. That said, when we think of our goal structure, we think of the work, the overarching goals that guides the work that happens in schools. Of course, each and every school, each and every department has some specific initiatives that they're always focused on, areas for improvement. Each individual has areas of focus where they seek to improve their own work, their own craft, regardless of position. But we have overarching district goals. These district goals are always aligned with our strategic plan, aligned with our strategic objectives, and really set a stage for the work that we do in our district. But even before we can get into thinking about those areas of focus, we have to be mindful that the successful reopening of our schools, the success in teaching in the hybrid and a distance model, and providing for the health and safety of every student and staff member comes before everything else that we do. So I want us to be mindful of that. We have to manage expectations in and around the goals that we set for ourselves as a school community, and our focus needs to be caring for our students, providing safe experiences, and making sure that our model of instructional delivery is effective. So that said, we have 3 goals that really align with this work. So when we think about our needs in transitioning back into school and thinking about students and staff who have not been present in school for essentially 6 months, we need to build an effective culture. We have to create a welcoming school community. Our first 2 goals speak directly to that. The first is going to be focused on developing a well-articulated, well-aligned K-12 social emotional learning plan. The foundation of that work has already been launched. It started with the SEL committee over the summer and is going to be facilitated in process in partnership with representatives from each and every school. There's going to be parent engagement, and it's going to be in partnership with CASEL that's going to utilize the assessment of our work that they did last year. The next level of this work is going to be our partnership with NYU's Metropolitan Center. Here, we are going to be looking at how we are going to ensure that all of our programs and experiences are equitable for every one of our students, and that we make sure we're providing access to opportunities for all of our students with a particular focus on Black, Indigenous people of color. Here, I already referenced the first step in that work, which occurred on the first superintendent's conference day on the 2nd, which was incredible. It was powerful work and really set the stage and provided another layer of motivation, if anyone actually needed motivation on this topic, but an area for us to begin to dig deeper. So we're going to have different tiers of professional learning. We're going to have one really deep level that is going to be focused on lead learner type work. Here we're going to have a cohort of faculty and staff and a couple parents that will engage in sustainable, culturally responsive, sustainable education training. Here we made some modifications from our original plan with NYU, recognizing the challenges that we have with school calendar, that we're going to spread it out into the fall of next year. So we're going to do the first 2 modules, I believe it is, the first 6 sessions this school year and the final 3 in the fall. We are also going to have NYU facilitate 2 building level workshops and PLRD days throughout the course of the school year. They're going to perform a root cause analysis, and importantly, when we think about the root cause analysis, this is digging into everything that is the Irvington schools. This is pulling back the curtain on process. This is pulling back the curtain on programs, opportunity, and having difficult conversations, acknowledging where we have to grow, where we have to see improvement, and making sure we're providing access to each and every one of our students, and again, in particular, our Black and Indigenous people of color. Growing out of that work is going to be the development of a strategic plan. This is all going to be work that is timeline and driven by contract with NYU, and process that is going to engage members of our community. As I said, with the lead learner training, there's going to be an opportunity for a few parents involved in that. There's deliberately going to be overlap between that lead learner training and the root cause analysis, because NYU, through their research and their work, believes there has to be that level of interface with boots on the ground that's doing the work today with the analysis that has to occur. From NYU's model, there's going to be opportunity to involve more parents in that process. And then, of course, the development of a strategic plan. And I want to be real clear that this is a multi-year plan that we're going to have to jump into. This isn't something where we think we can fix anything in a short period of time. Our focus here is going to need to be on how we can lead systemic change and do so in a sustainable fashion to make sure that what we do today will be in place tomorrow. The first step we take tomorrow, the next day, we'll be able to take the step that follows that. It needs to be smart and well thought out. The final area of goal work here is in and around the area of assessment. And when I think about what we're doing here, this all ties into reopening, right? Caring for the social emotional needs of our students and staff, creating welcoming school communities for every student, and then assessment. Answering that question, how do we know? And thinking about what we are doing, gaining more insight into student growth, student achievement, the effectiveness of our programs, and to making sure that we're using data wisely. Here we look forward to Ms. Ellis leading a good portion of this work, but we've also, much like in the other 2 goal areas where we've identified experts to help inform and guide our work, there's organization IDE that we'll be working with, as well as another professional, Diane Cunningham, who will be partners in this work with the district. So that said, Mr. Friedman, a little window in to where we're headed with our objectives for the year, and then a lot of critical important information associated with the reopening of school, with the exception of those few items that I highlighted in red there, all things that were referenced in my communication last week.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. So I'll now look to the rest of the board for their questions. Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman. I have one question and one comment only. The question, if you could go back to the slide with the flow chart.
I'm not displaying this.
You don't even have to go back. It was very clear on the chart. It said muscle aches.
You said what?
It's one of the, when you look at the flow chart, it said one of the things that you should stay home for is muscle aches. Can you be more specific? Because if you have children who are athletic, who are doing things and they're sore the next morning, how do you make the difference between a fluish muscle ache and do you know what I mean? Like if a kid played in a game and then tomorrow he's going to school, but his arm hurts a little bit because he did something. How do you make that judgment?
So David, that's a good question, but the answer is if it's more than typical. And I guess what you'd have to look at in this case is it typical if I work out to have a little bit muscle ache tomorrow that that's typical for me, so then that's a typical behavior, I wouldn't report that. But if it's something where you hadn't been working out and you hadn't had no other reason why you would have a muscle ache, then it would not be typical for you, and you would answer, yes, I have that symptom.
Got it.
So
That's it.
the really, and our survey actually says symptoms that are more than typical for you. Like if I wake up every morning a little congested, that's typical for me. I have little allergies at night from sleeping, like laying down, that's typical. I would not answer, I'm congested. But if I was severely congested, I couldn't breathe, then I'm saying, yes, I'm congested. So you really have to look at it on a personal level, and this is going to be an area of concern because we're going to have people who don't want to answer the questions incorrectly, and they're going to be super conservative, and there's others going to be like, yeah, that's just always normal for me, and they might actually have symptomatic. So there's really, it's not an exact science here, it's just meant to promote awareness.
I appreciate that. That was a great answer. Thank you. And the second comment second piece is just a comment to say that I am hopeful and looking forward to, and I know it's a big job and important work, is the work around assessment and data this year. I know it's a strange year to be diving into that kind of stuff, especially when we don't know what's going to happen, but I also heard you say there's a real opportunity here. I think of the fact that, this is a long-standing thing with me in sitting on the board. The opportunity for not having the state exams again really prevalent. We don't know where that's going to be, and sort of developing that piece really locally. I just want to say that I look forward to and will ask many questions throughout the year about how it's going. So thanks.
Yeah. Like I said before, it's going to be difficult to get beyond right now. It's in our minds, it's hard to get beyond the thinking about reopening. And I know there's parents that probably tonight will want to ask, well, are we still looking at grades 2 through 3 for 4 half-day model like we implemented for K1? And I'll say now, and please sit and don't think I'm trying to steal someone's question, but we will look at it. We can't do so now. We got to get going with the school year, and then we will take a look at it. We'll communicate with the community like we did everywhere along the way. But it's hard to think beyond what we're doing immediately. But when I think about those 3 goals, all of them seem overwhelming because it's a lot of important work. It's going to be a lot of time when time is going to be at a premium right now. But right now, each and every one of those goals makes so much sense for where we are and the complexities that we're facing. We need more assessment, better understanding the student needs, better understanding the effectiveness of our programs, and building the most welcoming school community possible. That's what we need to do today, and that's what those goals speak to.
Excellent, thank you. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of the teachers today, as well as all the administrators today from this parent's view, an excellent day. Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you. Beth?
So I wanted to go back to the same page in the presentation that Mr. Graber looked at, which is basically page 7. And I wanted to clarify a little bit about how testing works within the context of our health and safety in the school district. So I know that we are not asking people to test. There are certain situations in which if you do not test, you will have to stay out of school longer until you can produce a test. And I just think it's great that we have this page now that answers so many questions to so many people. But at the same time, this dashboard, which thank you, Superintendent, for raising this, it's almost like a fictional device, because whatever you're going to know about testing is going to come out so many days after the person is actually contagious that it is basically useless for anyone's purposes. So I want to thank you for raising that to the public, because there was a lot of media hoopla about it. But in the true operations of this school district, it is not helpful, and it actually is more work with very little positive result for us or for the community at large. I wanted to understand a little bit about how the app is going to work and what the timing is on that, and how any given school, perhaps you want to choose one building to describe this, how it would be noticed, for example, that the results hadn't been received and the child had arrived at school. Is it possible to explain that a little bit?
You want to speak to it, or do you want me to?
I guess I'm not really understanding what you're asking.
What I'm
So-
saying is,
So-
like, we talked a little bit about how everyone has a responsibility to put in either the Google form or the app regarding their child.
So
So,
I think I'll speak to it.
Thank
So
you.
Carol and Mary are more the experts in this area because of the work they've been doing on this front, but I think I get the question and they'll supplement. So when, on a daily basis, through the app, you can imagine there's a whole database that sits behind it. We'll be able to identify first thing in the morning, before students step foot into our school, who has not had the app completed, so we can begin to pull those students and isolate them. So you think of, in isolating them, they're going to be supervised and in a space with masks on and socially distanced until their health can be checked, and so on and so forth. When someone checks, you go through the questionnaire, and there's a whole series of assurances. And if you've had any of these symptoms, if you've traveled to one of the no-no states, you got to check yes and attest to the accuracy of that information. When you do it on the parent side, on the staff side, if you check no, that everything's good, no symptoms, I didn't go to one of the states on the quarantine list, you get a green thumbs up on your screen. If you check yes, that you have symptoms, if you've been to one of the states where you need to quarantine, you get a red thumbs down on your screen. When that happens, as soon as you submit that, there's an alert sent to the school. So school staff will receive an alert of the individuals that should not be in school based upon the completion. Again, that's students and staff. So realistically, the one challenge that we're going to have is, and every school is really facing this, is the capacity and the systems to be able to manage not letting kids on a school bus who didn't have the app completed. We're not that dynamic in process. But when those students arrive at school, the students are going to be isolated as soon as possible to limit any exposure. We make the assumption now that the vast majority of those cases are going to be someone that didn't follow through and complete the app, and they're going to be healthy individuals. But that in the case, if we do have something, we would follow where someone does test positive, we'll follow all of our processes that we've discussed in other meetings, where we will begin the contact tracing process with the Department of Health and shutting down a school, so on and so forth. So we are implementing the guidance that's been provided by the Department of Health. This is the model that we're looking at. There's some schools that are using Google Forms, in that we opted to go with an app because it'll be user friendliness will be there. And we're going to implement the protocols, understanding that it's still going to be a heavy lift, that we're still going to have staff that are going to have to supervise kids. We still have nurses that are going to have to evaluate kids, and I'm sure it's going to happen on a daily basis. But we're going to make our very best effort to make sure that any student who, one, did not have, or staff member who did not complete the app is not in the general population for very long. And then we'll have that followed up upon, and anyone that should not be in school based upon their completion of the questionnaire should not be reporting to school and will be immediately looked for to make sure they're not there. Those individuals will also have personal follow-up from the school nurse.
I just want to add one thing to that. For the parents who are listening, including board members who have children in the school, you will need your student's ID number, their eSchool ID number, in order to access this survey for your students. It would be too problematic to use an email address for you, because there's multiple email addresses and it's hard to match. So student ID is a unique field for every student. So you're going to need to memorize your child's student ID numbers. You'll also be needing them for lunch orders, for the pre-orders on the elementary side. The students already know them because they use them for their lunch orders now, but maybe the parents need to learn them as well. So unless the students are going to be completing the survey, which is actually ideal anyway, but if your parents are doing it for the student, then you need to know their ID number. So start memorizing. Thank you.
thank you for that. That's very helpful. I'm going to have to find out that ID number. I just wanted to check in on one other thing about Chromebooks, because this had come up at the secondary level, not in middle school, but at high school. So our high school is a bring your own device environment. But I've also heard in meetings here over the past few months that if we have a problem with IT, that actually using the Chromebook will give you more likely a swifter resolution. So in a school day in which you may have a remote relationship with your classroom teacher, is it the case that actually the Chromebook would be the better default device in case there's going to be an IT issue involving the teacher teaching remotely into a classroom?
Yes, that we will be able to provide technical support. Again, managing that within the capacity that we have, but we will certainly be able to provide a little more device-specific support
With the
and
Chromebooks?
with a Chromebook.
I just think
And
it's
I want to say a district-owned Chromebook.
Right,
So
thank
with a
you.
district-owned Chromebook, when there's updates, that our IT staff literally pushes them out remotely. When it hits the internet, it gets the updates, where we can't be certain that the same is going to happen on other devices. So student applications should still be fine because you're going through the district network. But if it's an actual device-related issue, we're going to be more apt to be able to help you if you're using a district-issued Chromebook.
I just thought it was important for the public to realize that, because otherwise you could feel like, well, I'm so much more comfortable with my Apple device. But in truth, it seems that there will be an advantage in terms of getting help from IT using the school-issued Chromebook. All right, thank you.
More?
So I guess I would like to also go back to the flow chart for a moment, just to ask a general practice question. So when my child has felt ill in the past, am I unmuted?
Can you unmute more?
No, that was Aaron. That was Aaron.
Asking if she could unmute.
Can you just speak up, please? I think that was Erin indicating that she couldn't hear you. So if you could just speak up more, that'd be great.
Or speak closer to the mic.
So if my child is ill, has any sort of symptoms, which would be, say, normally I would think it was a cold.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm going to keep them home, but barring keeping them home for 3 days, what this essentially means is they must go to the doctor and be tested before they can return. That's what the flow chart looks like to me. So rather than there being any kind of like, stay home and see what happens with the symptoms, essentially there's a visit to a healthcare practitioner.
Yeah. So,
How can return to school? Is that?
right. So let me reiterate the question for those that maybe didn't hear. That if a child was home with a typical cold, a runny nose, and as a parent, either you or I were to choose to keep our child home based upon the flow chart, which is based upon the CDC guidance and the Department of Health guidance, that a child with those symptoms would not be able to return to school if they, unless they, one, had a negative COVID test, or two, sat out for the required amount of time. So our recommendation in those cases, one is transparency and honesty. Let's not hide a child that's sick, and let's not give a child that may be feverish a Tylenol in the morning. But let's keep our child home when they're sick and then seek the necessary medical care so we can return a child to school potentially faster than the 10-day window that is recommended there.
And this is a more general question, which is maybe a public health question about how soon we're going to have a less painful and invasive test for younger children to do COVID tests, because I have a child who's already traumatized by these tests. So I think what I'm asking is, when will there be, I hope that our region sees a change, because there's going to be a lot of tests on children now, and it's going to be a tough fall.
Yeah,
At school in person.
I understand. Yeah, my lab at home is working as fast as we can to produce them, but joking. But like, for example, the contract that we're finalizing with Quest right now for employees is a saliva swab. It is not the intrusive testing that we're all thinking of for the standard COVID test. So our hope is that there's going to be more of that rapid response testing and the type of testing that we're seeing the state of New York lead when they have these outbreaks popping up around the state. So I haven't heard any specific information on that, but hopefully more of it will be landing in our area as soon as possible.
We should keep our ears open for that. Because
We should.
There's no way that I think kids are going to be open to this kind of testing on a regular basis if it means every single cold is going to result in a COVID test. Okay, the other question I had for you was in response to Ms. Propper's question. Dr. Harrison, when you said if you had been to states on the quarantine list, and that was referring to the children or to a member of the family having traveled. So
Yeah.
this is also related to something that I asked internally a couple of days ago. Could you clarify what it means if a member of the family has traveled to one of the quarantine
Yeah,
states?
so absolutely. So if we come back to the chart that I displayed before, on the left side of the chart, it says student or staff member. So that's what our focus is in a school. But if one of us as a parent traveled to a state that's on the quarantine list, when you returned, if you followed the New York State guidance as to how one should quarantine, which means that either upon your return, you literally stay in a different residence, so you're staying in a hotel or something when you return, or if you have isolation in your home, and there's specific guidance that New York State sets forth there, that you're sleeping in a different bedroom, you're using a different lavatory, that you're not sharing the same common space in a house, that you literally, for that 14 days, are isolated to a particular room in your house, using particular lavatory, and not interacting with your family member or touching common space, your child can attend school. If you're not able to quarantine at that level, which I can imagine how difficult that must be for folks, unfortunately, the child would have to stay out of school for those 14 days.
So all the family can really do then is to let their teacher know what's
Yes.
happening and have the child attend distance learning.
Yeah, if you're not able to fulfill that, as I acknowledge would be very difficult, that level of quarantining within your home or outside of your home, I would say to immediately, and if you know it's going to happen in advance, someone's got to travel for business, for example, or to tend to a family matter elsewhere, I would be communicative with your teacher and the administrator to be able to plan for that. In a case where that is such and the child is home, know that child will be able to access distance learning, of course. It's one of the great flexibilities that we have. A little bit different, but some information that I do want to convey, because we did get an email about it today, that if it was a situation where, to come back to the sniffles, right? Child is out with a cold, but it's not COVID and not able to come to school, the child will be able to participate in the distance learning on that given day. However, the child will still be marked absent, which is a necessary step for us to take on multiple fronts. One, we have to have accountability for contact tracing. And when we're going to roll back the hands of time, someone may not realize that Jake Harrison was home, and now all of a sudden we're calling in Jake Harrison's family because he was marked being present in school on that day. So when a child is absent but participating in distance learning, even though they're going to have the availability to engage in the learning, they still will be marked absence because our attendance records have to be spot on for who was physically present in school on that given day.
So in connection with that, would families who are 100% distance be in a separate category in those cases? So that is relating specifically to contact tracing and to hybrid model?
Yes. So I think you raised a good question. When we think of the daily health screening, this needs to be completed by students, parents of students, on the days that you'll be in school for in-person learning. However, if we do have a situation where a student that's in 100% distance learning, they test positive, we do need to know about it from a school side, because we know kids are going to be interacting outside of school. And as much as we want to say that everybody needs to live in that protective bubble, we have to be mindful of where those interactions may occur and where there's exposure risks.
So essentially, the school district kind of plays a role in that contact tracing chain. So it's necessary for the
We,
district?
yeah, either we're going to learn from a family of a positive test case, or Department of Health is going to notify us. Based upon how things rolled out today, I'm thinking that we're going to learn about it before anybody else calls us. And I hate to be saying that, but I think it's going to be our reality. So we will notify Department of Health. There's 2 dedicated phone lines that they've given schools in Westchester to report to, and they will lead us through the contact tracing process, where we will provide them all the necessary data that they need, and the Department of Health and their trained contact tracers will lead the process, not the school.
I have one more question. Thank you for explaining that. And that's relating to seeing a new consulting name who is going to be working with us this year, and just not recognizing that person. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about, and I'm referring to page 17, support from Diane Cunningham.
Sure, Diane Cunningham is a consultant that works quite a bit with
Your mic's not on. Yeah, your mic's not on.
Diane Cunningham is a consultant that works quite a bit with Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. She's done a number of workshops there on learning in a hybrid model and on assessment, and several of our teachers had attended workshops with her, and specifically some of our instructional coaches. And I reached out to them when I wanted to consider who should we bring in to support our teachers, and they felt that she would do really good work with our teachers. So she's going to be offering 2 workshops coming up this fall for our teachers. And then in addition, we've partnered with IDE, which is Nancy Sula's group. She's also a very well-known consultant in the area of hybrid learning and specifically in the area of assessment. And two of the consultants from IDE came to work with our staff on Superintendent Conference Day. And I've sent a survey out to the staff to see, did we meet their needs on that day, is basically the question I'm asking. To what degree did we meet your needs? And I'm getting very, very good feedback on all of the programs that we offered on Superintendent Conference Day. So we'll be continuing our relationship with those people throughout the year during our Wednesday afternoons. That is our dedicated professional learning time.
So the prior relationships with consultants who worked in educational coaching roles, will those be ongoing, or do these sort of supplant those?
So we're making decisions specifically based on each consultant, what their goals were with the teachers. You know, while we would have loved to have had both the time and the funding to continue everything that was in progress, we really needed to take a pause on some things to say, what do our teachers need now? Because the teaching is so different. So one thing that we've uncovered is specifically our science teachers are feeling challenged about how are they going to meet the needs with labs, especially at the high school level. So our relationship with Helen Pashley from Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES will continue. And we'll be looking again at each of the consultants who has been in the district to see, are those needs still there?
So the needs you've mentioned have related to hybrid education. It sounds like it's very now focused. So thank you for clarifying, and I'm finished.
I'll tell you, Diane's amazing, just for the record.
Thank you. Jane?
Okay. My question is, I'm worried that there might be a staff shortage, especially during cold and flu season. Is the district open to having a teacher who may have a sore throat, but she feels okay, or he feels okay? Can they teach remote from home and have a monitor in with those children, the hybrid children that are in school that day, if in an emergency situation?
I think we would have to play it on a case-by-case basis, and our first priority is going to make sure that we follow our protocols and plans that mirror that, the guidance from the Department of Health. And our hope is that it would be a short-term absence, that if someone has, a routine cold, that we'll be able to get the COVID testing, they'll be back in school within a couple days, assuming there's no more symptoms and fever-free as identified in that chart. But if we run into a position where we start to have challenges, we will look to be creative. But at the same time, we want to be mindful of the fact that our staff members have rights to a day off if they're sick, and we need them to rest and care for themselves. The challenge is going to be finding enough monitors to be able to do this. And I know a number of our administrators are probably watching the meeting from home right now. And today, many of them were interviewing, and tomorrow I know some of them have several hours worth of interviews. So I don't know that we would have enough to be able to provide that level of supervision. Here, I wish there was a simple algorithm to be able to determine, hey, at a given school at a district level, X number of teachers out means we have to pivot to 100% distance learning. But it's not that simple. It looks different in each and every school and how we can cover classes or the staffing that may be available to support it. So, if we find ourselves in a difficult spot, we'll try to be creative, but while respecting the rights our staff members have to be home sick and rest up so they're not out longer.
Yeah, no, if they were willing to.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Yep.
We'll now go to Erin, if you have any questions.
First, I also just want to thank everyone. I think today was a great success for the students. So kudos to all the hard work that's been done this summer to launch a really good first day. I think the kids are really happy, the parents are really happy. So I think we're all excited for a school year, a little abnormal, but a good school year ahead. So a couple of things just sort of came to mind as we were going through like those charts, and that's a great little flow chart on page 7. Are we having our consultants going through that same process of completing that app every day? And would that include also like our outsourced consultants who really worked for another vendor? Are they going through their own vendor protocols, or are they going through the school protocols? Just how's that working?
No, it's a great question, Erin. Anyone that steps foot in our schools will have to follow the Irvington protocols.
Okay. So should I ever come there, then that includes me for a board meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We know how to track you down if DOH needs to get in touch with you.
And then I just had one other question with the flow chart. So if a child or a staff member is identified at school as having one of these symptoms, are they isolated in the nurse's office or in another area outside the building? Because I know we're so limited on space. So how does that work in terms of the isolation?
Yeah, we have an isolation area in each of our nurses' office where students would be isolated with barriers that would be between them and other students or staff members, and to keep them apart until they could be safely removed from the school environment. And those areas where students would be isolated then would be sanitized immediately following the students' removal from school grounds.
Okay, and then that's one student at a time, obviously, or one faculty member at a time. Okay. And then sort of, sorry.
No, go ahead.
An extreme question, but if a child had the antibody test and tested positive and then comes, like gets the sniffles at school, like I'm thinking allergy season, like to everything Carol was saying, that's somewhat normal for kids, and they have tested positive for the antibodies. Do they still get removed from school?
Yeah, so the one thing that we know for certain is that there's no baseline test for COVID that can be reliable. You could go get a COVID test and not have COVID, and when you walk out of the doctor's office, contract COVID.
Right.
So we will have to go through that process, and each and every case will be evaluated with the Department of Health and our school physician. So there can be no broad brush here. We have to proceed with great care and caution in every case. So we know, hay fever season is going to be tough this year on top of the normal flu season and everything that we're going to face this fall and then again in the spring. We're going to have to proceed with caution.
So then that sort of leads me to the next question. So some of these students obviously then won't actually be absent. They'll be attending remotely. And I know we also like to track just absenteeism from the curriculum. So is there a thought of maybe having a different code when you're like not present in the building, but you're attending remotely under these types of circumstances? Because it does sound like we're being very strict with our guidelines, which I think is great. Like we have to be better to err on the side of caution. But I think there's a risk then that kids are going to be marked as absent as if they're not participating in the curriculum. And then as you evaluate grading and things like that, it's going to be impacted because you're not really going to have a model to be able to assess who really missed class and who was just not present in the building. Like, I don't know if your system can accommodate a different type of coding, like absent but remote, or, you know, not present or something to sort of accommodate that. Because I know we do track attendance, and we have discovered that lack of participation leads to, you know, there's a correlation with grades and success in the classroom. So how do you now cite or parse out that data?
Yeah, so it would be a different system that we would look at as opposed to saying straightforward in our student information system or eSchool Plus. What we'd be looking at would be monitoring and tracking student participation as opposed to the official register of present or absent. So that the student participation would still be monitored by a teacher. And so we would know that a child was participating in the curriculum on that given day. But the official record that would be in eSchool that would show up on a report card would indicate the day as an absence. But the participation in learning would be tracked and monitored at a school level.
So then all the students who are attending remotely are being marked absent in the student system? Is that also, am I making no?
No, if a student is 100% distance learning per parent option, or if it is a distance learning day within the hybrid model, the student attendance will appear as a distance learner. We have it differentiated in our student information system by cohort. So when we mark present or absent on a given day, it'll align with the cohort and whether they're physically in school or they're participating in distance learning on that given day. So that it'll be like a second tier of documentation that will occur outside of that system, just so we can track that the student was engaged.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess, and then one more question then. Do those absences impact our state funding at all? If they're not present but attending remotely?
No. I think in this, attendance is going to be something that's going to be looked at very differently in the COVID world. If someone is sick, they're being encouraged to stay home. So I cannot envision, well, I haven't seen anything in writing from state ed or Department of Budget. I'm sure there's going to be a great deal of latitude there. And in fact, based upon when we think of our own faculty and staff, if someone is out for a precautionary measure because they are displaying symptoms that could be COVID related, even though they believe that that they have seasonal allergies, for example, those individuals, their days would be documented as a COVID related absence. It's not billed against their bank of available sick days. So there's already essentially regulations for us to follow in that front for our personnel. So I would imagine there would be similar latitude with students.
Okay, now I'm really done. Thank you.
Thank you. I know Mr. Hanna had to drop off a minute for some work obligations, so he doesn't have any comments or questions at this time. So I'll just, again, thank you, Dr. Harrison, for tonight's presentation. Thank you to all of the staff, teachers, faculty, custodians, administrators, everyone who works in the schools, administrative assistants. I'm sure I'm leaving off someone. I'm violating my mother's first rule, which is don't start thanking people because you're always going to leave someone out. But whoever I did leave out, thank you for our successful first day and the preparations that are being made to start welcoming students into the building. But I did have also just one really in the form of comment, on the assessment piece, and I'm going to channel my Dave Graber at this point. Obviously this is something that the board has been very interested in. And I just want to say, I think we have a unique opportunity here to look at assessment and really start from scratch in some ways, because hybrid/remote learning is going to certainly necessitate new and different assessments. I think, to step back and think about what lessons are learned and what we can use to adapt to even when we are hopefully all back in school together full time will be great, so we can start to create more of those local-based assessments to hopefully use not just this year, but going forward. So really more in the nature of a comment. And with that, as I also see Jane walking out, I'm going to move that we take a short 5-minute recess and then come back to deal with our consent agenda. So I move for a recess.
And community comment?
Yeah, that'll be after, yes. So all in favor?
Thank you. Thank you.
Aye. And now we'll move to can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Great. Well, now we're getting towards our time for community comment. So if there's anyone who would like to make a comment at this time, please put your name and address in the Q&A function, and you'll then be recognized for those comments. I know, Dr. Harris, I'm sure you have some comments on our consent agenda items. So, yes.
I want to go to stop to welcome a number of colleagues, folks that were part of the Irvington family. To begin, we have our new guidance counselor at the high school, Kyle Bate, and Kyle is actually already here and began last. Sorry, I would like to welcome Kyle DeBate, a new Irvington High School guidance counselor. Mr. DeBate is already here with us and supporting our students. We have a number of aides that we're appointing, and I would like to certainly welcome them. Rebecca Bear, I would like to welcome as a leave replacement teacher working in Dow's Lane. Also, Kimberly Ross as a leave replacement teacher at Dow's Lane as well. Then we have a long-term sub, Ashley Noda, who's going to be working at Main Street School. And then Megan Hars, who's going to be a special education teacher at Dow's Lane during this period of time. You'll see we're starting to appoint a number of monitors per our needs that I referenced earlier in the meeting. And when you'll see the next agenda, there'll be a number of monitors that I'll appoint on an emergency basis that the board will then confirm after the fact. So thank you. And then off the consent agenda, I do want to give a shout out and accolades to our custodial staff and our buildings and grounds crew, who has done an amazing job in helping us ready for the schools. Our teachers, administrators, support staff have bent over backwards, but I certainly need to acknowledge them personally and thank them for all their great work.
You know, we certainly second that. So I'm not seeing anyone posting any request to speak. I'll give it just another couple minutes, or actually really seconds, and then we will adjourn.
You got one?
Yes. Stephanie Fonseca, 25 Eiler Lane.
Hi, good evening. Firstly, thank you for a heroic effort in attempting to simplify remote learning. As a parent to younger children, remote learning is simply difficult for so many reasons, some specific to the models adopted and others just inherent in learning from a computer. As such, I would appreciate it if Ms. Stein could speak a bit about how families choosing to homeschool impacts, if at all, our district's funding now and in the future. And also, would you be willing to share how many families have chosen to homeschool this year?
Hi, Stephanie. I'm glad to answer that question. At this point in time, I believe we have 7 families that are homeschooling their children, which is an increase of either 2 or 3 over last year. Certainly, student attendance and registration does have an impact on some of our expense-based aids and some of the formula aid, but realistically, a couple students along those lines certainly will not have an impact on our overall funding concerns at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no other people who are looking to make a comment, our next meeting will be September 22nd. Same place. Oh, sorry. Got someone coming in under the wire. Christina Cavi DiCarlo, if you could also please provide your address when you 52 Sunnyside Place. Ask and thou shalt receive. Be recognized for your question, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes. Okay. Hi. Yes. First of all, thank you for everybody who is just going up, just doing knocking all of this out of the park. It's just, we really, as a community, we really, really appreciate what everybody is doing, from the staff to the faculty, teachers, and all of you in the administration and the Board of Education. One question, could you please elaborate how the specials teachers are able to teach multiple classes in person at Dow's Lane? I have twin kindergartners. I'm sorry, I used to have twin kindergartners, twin first graders in the same class. And so, for example, for cohort A, 3 different classes have library at the same time. 3 different classes have art at the same time. What does that look like for the kids that are in the classroom? Are you combining the children, or the teachers going from one class to another? How does that work? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. You are correct that the special area teachers, specials will be scheduled with 3 classes meeting at the same time, remembering that those are half of a class. So in each classroom, there would be 10, 11, possibly 12 children and 1 teacher. So no, they are not going to be combined. That wouldn't be aligned with our practices regarding social distancing. So there will be a monitor in 2 of the classrooms and the teacher in the 3rd classroom. The instruction will be streamed into the other 2 classrooms. In the beginning, the teacher will provide some direct instruction, and then they'll have the opportunity to freely move between those 3 classrooms and check in on kids as they're working.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now with that, I'll finish the announcement that our next meeting is here, September 22nd at 7:30. And with that, if I could have a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting, please. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.